Welcome back to Beauty is Eternal, the art of being your best self for women. Today's episode is called The Transcontinental Search for Meaning, How Food, Mental Health, and Self-Expression Shape Karishma's Journey. They say that which you search for may never be found. Yet on the other hand, if you do not figure out what you want, you will probably never get it. We all search for meaning in our day-to-day lives, trying to make sense of hardships and setbacks while keeping our hearts open and our dreams alive. Part of being human means having a diversity of experiences. Some feel quite positive, some rather negative, but they all combine to shape our experiences of life, which we in turn shape by how we perceive them, depending, of course, on what your beliefs about reality are. Today, I have a wise guest and an expert on business and health who is going to let us in on her experiences and life lessons. Karishma Daswani is someone that has performed her search for meaning on 4 different continents to date in her 33 years of life. First, as she moved with her family, and later as she moved on her own. Born in Nigeria to parents of Indian heritage, she left with her family to live in Dubai in her early teens. Thereafter, in her late teens, her family moved to Vancouver and she went with them. While her family stayed there, she moved alone to Europe in 2014, settling in Madrid to attain her master's in business and in London to attain a master's in public health, and thereafter in Berlin to launch a natural foods company where she built up the brand as managing director. She was drawn to working with food because it was one of the few things that tied together her life experiences of living on different continents. While living in Berlin, she became involved in various aspects of mental health, including talk and somatic therapy, cold therapy, positive versus negative thinking, sound healing, and meditation, among others. She also realized her true passion was art and how powerful self-expression is to the development of the self and to self-health. Because Karishma has such a unique background and has been involved with so many aspects of health, I am interviewing her in order to understand what has this transcontinental journey taught her about the meaning of life. What do food, mental health, and self-expression have to do with it, and how do they relate to one another? How did working on her mental and emotional health solve her real-life bladder problem? In her search for meaning, what has she found? Without further ado, let's begin now. Karishma, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, all our listeners are really excited to learn more about you and your search for meaning. So I want to start at the very beginning. Tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up in Nigeria.
So my father was actually born in Nigeria, and my mom grew up in Ghana. And so we grew up in a Sindhi community in Lagos. I would say I had very strong Sindhi roots. Even though I was in Nigeria, that was a huge part of it. And it's funny because at the time, when you're young, what your norm is, and then you leave, everything changes.
What was the norm in Nigeria for you?
Well, you don't have electricity most of the time, and I think that's the case for everyone. Maybe a few hours a day, if you're lucky, you have a generator. It's very hot, and I remember doing my homework to with the candlelight and just getting really sweaty and frustrated. But I remember when you do have electricity, and we did watch TV, and then it goes off in the middle, you get used to this all right, nothing's changed. You just everything goes dark, and you just have to find your way around, find some candles. Not having electricity, and maybe now it would be much more difficult with internet and stuff, but not having electricity back then was quite normal, and not having running water was also very normal, and yeah, that was basically my norm till I was 11.
And you grew up with 2 brothers.
Yeah.
Your twin brother and one younger brother.
Yes. I had a twin brother, yeah, and a younger brother who was 6 years younger than me.
Was it different for boys and girls growing up in Nigeria, or was it very similar for all of you?
I would say it was quite similar. I think in Nigeria it's more gender equal than like at least the Indian culture that I grew up with. So for me, it didn't feel like a huge difference. Though I think with the Indian culture there was a difference, but lucky for me I had a twin brother and I would always like leverage that. I'm like, oh, he could do this. We're twins, so I should. Worked out well.
And what kind of food did you eat when you were growing up in Nigeria? I know food is very important for you.
Yeah. We ate a combination of, so we ate mostly, I would say, Indian food, but some Nigerian food as well. And I actually really like Nigerian food. But it's very carb heavy.
That's just
you're
what I
not
was
getting,
gonna ask.
yeah, you're not getting much greens. And I think in general we didn't have a lot of greens except for like Indian vegetarian stuff. But it's filled with masala and spices, so you almost don't taste the vegetables. But yeah, I think when I was younger, food wasn't a big part of my life. I think this only happened later when I explored other foods.
So you moved to Dubai when you were 11 years old.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was very, very different from Nigeria, of course. You know, going from like West Africa to like Dubai is essentially like a developed city where you have proper infrastructure. But at the same time, Dubai back then was very different to Dubai now. So that's Dubai in the mid-90s. So pre all these cities and skyscrapers and before the real estate boom and before, you know, foreigners could own or leasehold properties. So it was mostly desert. But there was like a pretty decent sized international community. It was, I think, culturally a big shock for me. And it's so funny because I don't know if it was the great like overcast sky or what it was, or maybe because Lagos is like a port and, you know, the oil. But I remember that the seawater was always brown, or always looked brownish to me. And I remember in Dubai seeing like blue sea, and I was so shocked at this, you know.
And how did it affect you emotionally and mentally to move to somewhere so different from where you were from at that age?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I was always very introverted, actually. I think that actually this move wasn't as hard as the next move because I was still quite young, but I very much kept to myself. And I think I was very fortunate that I have a twin brother, so I was never really fully alone in all these moves and the experience. Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you went to an English-speaking school when you were there?
Yeah, I did. I went to an international school. I think the school itself wasn't too different from what I was used to, but I think it was just the city that was very different. And even though it was like very developed, again, Dubai mid-90s is different from Dubai now and was much more conservative than Dubai now. And I wasn't used to the conservative culture, even though coming from an Indian culture, but Nigeria is not conservative in that way, so I wasn't used to that.
Can you tell me more about how Dubai was conservative?
Like, it wasn't that bad, but like, for example, in school, we had a dress code where we had to cover our shoulders and knees. This was not the case in Nigeria. And also, I little things I remember, like, you know, when you go to a store and there's a magazine, if there was a woman on the cover, they would cover the woman, you know, in Sharpie, so you wouldn't really see her except for like her face or something. And, you know, in my textbooks, like my social studies textbook, certain words were blacked out.
Wow.
Certain countries or religions and stuff. Yeah.
So it sounds like because you had a twin brother, you never felt totally alone. Did this bring your family closer, moving together to a different country like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good move for us, to be honest. back then, I think when I was young, it was mostly under military rule, I think. And the situation was just not so great, or it was probably worse at that particular time, and my parents just wanted us to move somewhere a bit safer.
So you left for political reasons and safety reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the situation was that much different because it kind of changes frequently, but I think my parents were like, it's time for a change, and they just wanted something a bit better for us. So I think they moved for us.
Oh, that was a good move on their part.
Yeah. Very, very fortunate.
I know you were not super focused on food at that time.
Yeah.
But out of curiosity, what did you think of the food in Dubai?
So we ate a lot of Lebanese food, and it was amazing. Actually, I grew up eating a bit of Lebanese food in Nigeria as well, because there's quite a large Lebanese population there, and has been for a few generations. I think they're actually maybe the largest expat population.
Wow.
Yeah, or at least at the time, from what I remember in like the 80s, 90s. So I always liked Lebanese food, and in Dubai it was everywhere, and it was so good. So I ate a lot of that, a lot of like Arabic food in general, and I love it so much. Yeah.
Well, you seem pretty excited now when you talk about it, so I can tell. I can tell you like it. So after that, you moved to Canada with your family. So once again, both your brothers, your mother and father, picked up and moved to Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reasoning behind that move?
Well, my parents decided to immigrate to Canada. And I think, again, it was just for us. I think it was to give us more opportunities, and just a better life. And I'm very grateful. I wouldn't be here in Berlin. I wouldn't be able to get a visa here, if I didn't have Canadian citizenship.
That's true. You have just a Canadian passport.
Yeah. I had an Indian passport before, but India doesn't allow dual, so...
And you don't walk properly like an Indian, so...
Yeah, clearly. Canada accepted me. Yeah.
And what was it like for you to move to Vancouver? What was this experience like for you to move to, once again, a totally different culture, probably even further away? Probably Nigeria and Dubai, Lagos and Dubai are closer together than Canada.
Actually, no.
Really?
Yeah, I think Lagos was just so far away. And then Dubai being developed, Canada as well, in some sense was much more similar. Yeah, culturally it's different, but you had same basic necessities in a way, I think the only thing that was more common was the weather in Nigeria and Dubai. But Canada was, I think my expectations were different from reality, and also like learning to deal with the cold for the first time. I did not know how to layer all these things.
You had a weather shock.
I had a weather shock, yeah. And at school it was so different. It was much more different than Nigeria and Dubai, because I went to international schools there. To me it was really different.
What kind of differences stand out to you?
So it was very international in a different way. My school in Vancouver, it was first of all very large. Like the classes were like so many more people, and the entire school had probably 10 times the number of people or something like that.
Wow.
And so we had French immersion, we had IB, and we had ESL, English as a second language. And so it was really diverse. And actually, because we had ESL, and there are a lot of immigrants in Canada and Vancouver, in that area of Vancouver, so a lot of people didn't speak English or didn't speak English well. And for me, English was my first language. In Nigeria, it's the official language, although, different dialect, Pidgin English. So when I got there and people were speaking to me in different languages and Punjabi, and I'm not Punjabi, so I was so confused. I would say, in fact, it was more of a culture shock for me, because my expectations were different.
What did you expect?
I didn't expect it to be so international to the point that that there were so many different languages around me. I think in Dubai and in Nigeria, I mean, people spoke a lot of English. Nigeria, definitely, it's the common language, and being an ex-British colony, and Dubai because it's just international, but Vancouver, you just heard everything, Yeah.
So Karishma, where do you feel like you're actually from?
It's a really good question. And I feel like my answer always changes depending on who's asking me.
Well, I'm sorry for asking you something I know you get asked a lot.
So I think that I have a tendency to automatically answer it in a way that I can associate with the other person better. So it just automatically comes out that, like with you, I would say I'm Canadian because I feel that you would relate more, and I do it so like subconsciously, I don't think about it. In a way, I would kind of say Canadian because when I'm in India, even though we have like such strong like tradition that I grew up with and my culture, they look at me and they know I'm not from there just by the way that I walk, even if I don't speak.
How does a typical Indian walk that's different from how you walk?
I actually don't know, but I've been told this. And then in Nigeria, I obviously don't look Nigerian, but in Canada, it's very inclusive, very multicultural, even though I feel more international and not as like Canadian, it's still like very inclusive. So in a sense, I would feel more Canadian. However, I recently was talking to someone and I had trouble answering this question. And she said to me, because she asked, like, where do you feel like you belong? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like thinking about it. And she was like, you belong to yourself.
Nation of one.
She's like David Bowie specifically was her example. You belong to yourself. And I was like, I like that. I don't belong to any country in particular. I belong to myself.
That's a very well said explanation for where you're from.
Yeah, I liked it.
What was it like for your parents when you moved to Canada? Was it hard on them to make this transition?
Yeah, I think it was really hard, and I think it was such a bold move, It was such like a high risk move, for my dad, like moving and like, like also like work, everything's still up in the air and like your income and all of that stuff. And then moving a whole family, not knowing if it was going to work out, not knowing anything. And, at the time when I moved, I was like, okay, we're doing this. Okay, we're doing that. You just have to like assimilate again. But I didn't really think about my parents and my dad especially because, my mom wasn't working. So the whole financial burden was on my dad. I actually was only really thinking about it recently this year. And I realized, wow, like to move a family with 3 kids, like you have to have a lot of guts and be like a risk taker.
Yeah.
And 2 moves, different cultures, different countries. And okay, me, I just had to, again, like I said, assimilate into a new school. But, like all the paperwork, like everything you have to go through, all the legal stuff, and then making sure that we have food or everything that we need, like
change is much easier when you're young. When you're a child, you adapt quicker, you learn things quicker. When you're older and you've got more responsibility, more important decisions to make, it's really hard actually.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how my father did it. I really don't know.
Must have taken a lot of strength.
Yeah, I think he has a lot of strength, like a lot of mental strength, mental and physical in this sense. But yeah, I really am so appreciative. I actually told him that on the phone like 2 days ago.
So you moved to Canada with your family, you study there, you go to high school, you acclimate to it, and then you move on your own to Europe to study after that.
So I actually did my undergrad in Canada, but I didn't stay in Vancouver. I went to a town called Kingston, and it was halfway between Montreal and Toronto. And I think I just wanted to have my own experience. I wanted to, go somewhere different. And I also didn't want to go somewhere where my twin brother was going, because I wanted to finally have a different life and not just be considered a twin. And, I'm really glad that I did. I had a great time. And I feel like it was like my step towards developing myself,
That was your first time living out on your own without your family.
Yeah. I feel like you kind of need that step, I mean...
I agree.
Yeah. You learn more about yourself when you're away. But, okay, so why didn't I stay in Canada?
Yeah. Well, then after that, you moved to Europe.
Yes. So I moved to London. I did my master's there. I'm not sure why I chose London specifically. I just felt like an itch to go somewhere I hadn't been or hadn't lived, And after that, I studied public health, and so after that I went back to Nigeria, and then I went to India, and so I did health consulting and some public health stuff, some NGO stuff, and I don't know, I felt like the moves were so natural for me, it's like the constant in my life became the move, And then after that, I moved to Madrid and then Berlin. So I've been in Europe for 5-6 years now. Yeah.
And how has living in Europe changed your relationship to your family? Has it changed it?
I don't know if living in Europe in particular, but being away, definitely. I have to say that I don't think I'm the best communicator using phone. So I don't reach out as much as I should, or I didn't reach out as much as I should, and that's something that I have changed quite a bit this year already. I generally don't like using my phone too much. I like living in the here and now, but...
Well, that actually makes sense. That's actually how we're meant to live.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I think that, I think it changed me and thus my relationships living away, because like I said earlier, you discover more about yourself and you sort of transform and become yourself in a way, because you grow as a person with new experiences and meeting new people. I think that my relationship with my family wasn't much different for a long time, but it's slowly changing now for the better, and I think that's because I'm putting in more effort with communication. I think, and also because I've changed a lot recently, that it's helping my relationships too.
Well, I think our family is really, really important, and especially those of us that live further away.
Yeah.
It becomes really important to communicate via phone and text message, but it's also not easy, especially for people who are not always on their phone. Some people are stuck to their phone, not everybody is.
Yeah.
So for people not stuck to their phone, it's a little bit...
Yeah, I generally don't like to use my phone, and it's funny because I'm also quite introverted, and I think that this translates as well, like, to the phone, not just calling, but messaging. I just don't really like it so much. And I think I actually didn't like to speak on the phone at all until maybe the last year or two. If my phone was ringing, I would get really anxious. I couldn't answer it.
Well, you've definitely changed a lot.
Yeah, I've changed a lot. It would really give me anxiety.
Wow.
I couldn't make phone calls, and voice notes were already difficult.
Well, having very talkative friends is definitely one way to cure that.
To get over it, yeah, I'm very lucky on that front. I have friends that kept calling me until I answered, finally.
Did your family play any role in you deciding to get 2 masters, one in public health and one in business? Or what was the reasoning that you wanted to get two masters? That's fairly unique.
Yeah, I don't think they played any direct role. I studied health as my undergrad, and it was quite multidisciplinary. So it was like everything from the science to the social to a little bit of health psychology as well. And then I really liked the epidemiology part, and so I decided to do a master's, and I was looking into doing a master's in epidemiology, but I decided public health in the end because it was more applicable to different things. It was more broad, and that's actually one of the reasons why I chose to study at Imperial, because it's a very science-based school, so I could get the public health degree while studying more science and doing more research.
Take note, everyone out there who is interested in studying more about science.
Yeah, lots of cool research coming out of Imperial. And then the second master's was a few years later, and I didn't actually think that I would ever study business or that I would ever enjoy studying business. My family, like my dad, my brothers, my uncles, my grandfathers, like all, were entrepreneurs. And so business is a big part of our culture,
It's
actually.
in your blood.
Yeah, my dad always says, business is in your blood, he tells me. I think that's when he tried to convince me to study it for my undergrad. But, I'm very analytical. I love science. Very curious all the time. But yeah, I didn't think that I would ever study business, and I thought that I had trouble. I took one, I think it was a management class during my undergrad as an elective, and I found it really tough because it's just concepts, and I was like, I can't think that way. I need to visualize things. I found it really difficult, but I think after I was working in India, and I did some health promotion work, and then I started doing consulting for companies creating food products, and then I helped with some branding, and I was like, oh, I actually really like this, and I'm like, okay, let me look more into this, and then I think that sort of opened the door for me into business, and I started getting interested. That's when I decided to go to business school. Yeah.
And you went to one of the best business schools in Europe.
It was a really good experience for me. So I think it helped me learn to think very differently. I like to, the way I like to explain it is, in science you think in a linear fashion, very logical in that linear way. And I think with business you think more globally. And I don't mean internationally, I mean global as in you have to piece together different concepts from different areas, and there has to be alignment and everything. And so I feel that it taught me to think differently and to look at the world a little bit differently, despite whether or not I am good at being an entrepreneur.
I would say that you're very good.
I'm really glad that I had the experience.
And very modest.
Thanks.
While living in Madrid, you had the idea for Mindfuel, the company that you ultimately founded in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the idea for Mindfuel come from? Tell us a little bit more about that experience for you.
Mm-hmm. It was a very organic approach, I would say. Our first product was one that I made for myself, because while I was studying in business school, we were always working till quite late, and everything was shut. The cafeteria was shut, and all they had was they had vending machines, which the healthiest thing were almonds, and I also wanted something a bit more filling and sweet in this instance. So I started making little mixes to chia puddings for myself, and carrying it with me, because I was like, oh, there's a water fountain, I can just add water and then make this pudding for myself. And so I started bringing it to school. Two other guys I was working with, they saw it and they were like, hey, this is a really great idea, let's try and sell this. So we tested it out a couple times at business school, and we tried selling it, and we went well. And then it was towards the end of our program, and we were like, you know what, let's just test this out and see. And this is when we decided to come to Berlin, because Madrid was not the most ideal place for this type of product, and we were actually thinking that Berlin would be really good because there's a huge vegan community here. In Germany, organic food is is a big trend. And Berlin's a very affordable city to bootstrap. So we were like, okay, let's come test it out here. And we did. We tested it at some of the markets. And we made like the fresh puddings and people liked it. So we were like, okay, let's try packaging it and selling it. So it was sort of one step at a time. Since then, I've come out with a lot more different flavors and more products.
So that was what brought you to Berlin
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Since you've been here for 4 years now, how do you think that you've changed mentally and emotionally in this time?
I think I've changed a lot. I think in one way, through work, it's helped me gain a lot of self-efficacy in what I've been doing, because it was my first time starting a company, and I did think it was something I could do, but I kind of just jumped into it, And through that, I gained a lot of experience in different parts of the business, because I tried a little bit of everything, In the beginning, you have to do everything.
And learn everything the hard way.
Yeah, exactly. You also learn what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like and what you don't like, which I think were really important for me. And then I think personally, I've changed a lot as well. Part of that is through some health issues that I went through. They sort of led me on a different path to explore myself and my mental health more, and emotional health, let's say. It's so interesting how, something can change your trajectory for you,
Completely.
Yeah, and I feel that I have personally changed a lot here in Berlin. Also, socially, I think as well. I've always been, like I said earlier, more introverted and shy. And, I used to be, when I was a teenager, very socially anxious. And I feel so different now, and I feel so different here, So I guess it's also maybe 3 decades in, coming into yourself and becoming you. Took a while.
I think that's about the appropriate time.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm a little bit slow.
Would you take us down the path a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to get into your health issues if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
About how you first started to sort of reflect on yourself, and how any health issues might be related to emotional issues.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've done in terms of self-exploration.
Mm-hmm. I don't mind talking about my health issues. I can do that. I had a lot of pain, basically, and it was to do with my bladder. So it was basically a long process to figure out what was wrong. Essentially, the doctors initially thought it was bladder cancer, but it wasn't. It just symptomatically presented similarly, and it was very, very, very painful, but they couldn't figure out what the cause was. So of course,
that must have been really scary.
Yeah, it was really scary. And I think, living away from my family, I was used to that, but that was the first time that I truly felt alone. It was kind of that was the time in which I was I wish that I was with my family. Even though I have really good friends here, it was just something that I think always had trouble leaning on people. And so I'm sure that, I could have, but initially I think I didn't want to. I was the type of person that just wanted to do everything on my own, and that made it even harder. But I felt so alone and so scared for the first time in my life. I didn't even know what was happening to me. Yeah, and I am not going to go into the details, but it was pretty bad. After having surgery and diagnosing properly, the doctors still didn't understand why I had this. They said that, especially at my age, this was not common, and my bladder was basically in the condition of an immunocompromised 80-year-old or something. Yeah. I remember when I had my surgery, and the morning that I woke up, there were like 7 doctors in the room. They're all speaking, and they were all just like, doesn't look good, doesn't look good. I was like, oh my God, no. I woke up to that at like 7.
No.
But anyway,
no.
I decided to sort of explore on my own and try and figure it out, because I was like, how am I supposed to fix this properly if I don't know what's causing it?
That's logical.
Yeah. So I tried so many different things, like not only to figure out what it was, but also different types of solutions, So, I went to my urologist, and I did like everything she said. Unfortunately, a lot of it was taking antibiotics for like, I don't know, 6 months, no, almost a year, something like
Daily?
that. Daily, yeah. It really like affected my body a lot. And in retrospect, I wouldn't have done that, knowing what I know now. But okay, at the time,
you were
I
searching
was,
for an answer.
yeah,
and
I was pretty desperate,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had to go in for these like catheters. But anyway, that was all for the symptoms. So I was still searching for the cause. I did everything from, I went to a naturopath. I found out about my immune system and how bad it actually was, And I started doing acupuncture. I did so many different things, because I read about how, bladder issues might be related to, or like has comorbidities with gut issues. So I tried a lot of different things. And then I was listening to a lecture on how suppressing your emotions can manifest physically as cancer or heart disease. And I was like, I don't know. Like, people told me that, and someone mentioned to me that, the bladder in Chinese medicine has something to do with fear. And, I never really believed in that. I was like, no. And when I heard this, it was coming from a doctor that I respect. And so I was like, okay, let me dig a little bit into this. And yeah, there's a ton of research on this, on how like suppressing emotions can lead to cancer. And in the lecture, he was describing the type of person that suppresses their emotions. He called it an emotion stuffer. And I was listening to it, and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly me. He's describing me. So it kind of like, it was a bit of a wake-up call for me. And I was like, okay, if it can lead to cancer, it can lead to what I have. So I need to figure this out.
Also very logical.
Yeah.
That you really followed this very scientifically.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
It's like how my brain always works. So then I decided I think I wasn't mentally ready to start therapy. That took me a while. I was like, no, first I'm going to read everything. I was always like, oh, I can always do everything on my own. Not the case. But I did learn a lot, and I started somatic experiencing. I actually first heard about somatic on the Tim Ferriss podcast, like maybe 2 years before that. And I heard about it, and I was like, interesting, but not for me. And then I was thinking about it, and actually you had mentioned somatic to me. So I was like, okay, let me look into this. And I was like, I think more open to starting somatic experiencing before therapy. And so I started that, and then therapy later. And I think between both of these things, and just me always wanting to read and learn and understand myself more, and then starting to meditate, which really helps you understand first of all, pay attention to your thoughts. Wow, it's crazy what I learned about myself. Like, one, through speaking, like all the metacognitive stuff, but another through meditation, just this thing about watching your thoughts or catching your thoughts. I had no idea that I was thinking in certain patterns, and I had no idea how destructive they were to myself and how negative they were. And I was living my life in these thoughts. Like, that was just me, that dialogue. I sort of became these thoughts, It was so subconscious. But when I started paying attention to them, it was kind of like a wake-up call. I don't have to be thinking like this, I don't have to be thinking so negatively. I didn't know I was thinking so negatively. And then once you're aware of this, you can change it. You can catch your thoughts and stop them.
It's hard to change something you don't know that is happening.
Yeah.
it's hard to make a real change if you're unaware of something.
Yeah. So yeah, I think somatic and the therapy.
Step one is definitely awareness.
Yeah, it really helped me start talking about things that happened in my life that I was suppressing, and you start releasing by talking, and you start emotionally releasing, and then I also tried to do different I was looking into other release techniques and like different things you could do, and like a lot of it is also physical. I needed to think about this stuff because I had really buried it so deep down, and some of it like came up, you know. I knew that it was there, but I didn't want to think about it. So I have been reading a lot about letting go, and about letting go of emotions and like negative emotions. And first of all is like, you know, how we have different coping strategies like suppression, repression, also expression, like when we complain about things. Another coping mechanism is like eating or like alcohol and things like that. And I'm trying to pay attention to when I use any of these coping strategies with negative emotions, and I'm trying to learn to be aware of my negative emotions that I'm holding inside of me and release them. And I'm also learning about positive emotions and how there are things that we can still release there, because there's some negative, I don't really want to use the word negative, but there are some associated feelings that we could also release. For example, with love, there's attachment, you know, and love is very giving, you know, whereas attachment is a little bit taking, you know, like we feel that we deserve, or something like that.
Ownership.
Exactly, yeah. I'm learning about uncoupling this, you know, and trying to release, and it's crazy that when you start releasing some of this, like, you feel like a burden is lifted off of you, you know.
Has your health improved? Has your bladder health improved by learning to release? Wow.
So it's been a year now since I've
amazing.
It's been a year now since I've had a big flare up. My birthday was 2 weeks ago, under 2 weeks ago, and the last time I had a big flare up, it had started on my birthday last year. And so like on my birthday, I was like so happy. I was like, it's been 1 year now.
That was the best present you could have gotten.
It really
was a good health.
Yeah, it really was. It was like an accomplishment, you know. And it was about a year ago that I actually started the somatic and like diving into all of this stuff. Just a little bit after my birthday, I think.
So you're doing both somatic experiencing and you're doing therapy and you're also involved in meditation.
Yeah. And then I'm generally reading.
And you're also going to sound healing. I also know you've gotten interested in.
Yes. A lot of the gong baths and stuff. And very interested in sound healing and how different sound frequencies can affect our nervous system. And it's kind of interesting, like with the EEGs. And yeah, I'm trying to read about everything that can like reduce my activation level, you know. Oh, I wanted to say also what I found very interesting is that all of this has helped me become more spiritual, actually. And I think I didn't believe anything before, you know, again, being very scientific minded. And I don't know what has changed, but something has made me look at things differently and made me more spiritual. But again, I'm approaching it through a scientific way.
Well, what does it mean for you to be more spiritual?
I think sort of believing in possibilities.
Believing in things that you can't necessarily see or measure?
Yeah, because I'm learning that what I have always believed is things we could only measure from our five senses, in a sense, you know. I mean, this is just our perspective. Animals have their own senses that, you know, like a dog can know who was in that spot 5 hours
when it's gonna
prior.
rain.
Yeah. And like to us, like if I could tell who was right here, if I could smell who was here 5 hours ago, that would be like, you know, me being psychic. But to a dog, this is like his life, you know, it's normal, you know. So I'm really realizing that I was thinking in such a limited way, you know, and I just had to be a little bit more open to possibilities. And I started reading more about physics, and it's making me really open to possibilities. Yeah.
What kind of things do you think might be possible now that you previously would have said, no way? That doesn't make any sense. My scientific brain is going red alert, false, don't like. What kind of stuff now do you think you would look at and you'd say, actually, well, maybe that is possible, or actually, hey, that kind of makes sense, even though my senses can't totally register it.
Yeah. You know, like something as small as like paying attention to like energy or intuition. And I think in the past I would have been like, oh, you know, I feel this from this person because subconsciously probably I am noticing things that they do or things that they say, and it's just my subconscious mind is piecing this together, and thus I feel this quote-unquote energy from them or whatever. But now I'm like, okay, that could be part of it. But okay, so basically now I feel like that rather than thinking only in terms of Newtonian physics, you know, like what I see, what I hear, what I feel is real and that's it, I'm actually limiting myself and I'm limiting my brain. I'm not allowing myself to see what may or may not be there. And then, you know, when you read about quantum physics a little bit and you read about how like paying attention to this one experiment can change whether light or matter is perceived as a particle or a wave, and it's like, wait, what? So my consciousness can somehow, you know, alter this or influence this, you know, that's kind of mind-blowing in a way. It's like simple experiment from, I think it was like earlier in the 1900s. Yeah, I'm realizing there's so much of it is actually energy related. If you think about atoms and even the nucleus, which is where the matter is, a lot of like the quantum particles are energy related, energy and light related. It's so fascinating. Basically, I think that there's a lot of different waves and stuff, you know, and we can only see a very limited wavelength, and we know that, but it just goes to show that there's so much out there. Just because we can't make sense of it or can't harness it doesn't mean it doesn't somehow influence us.
So in addition to opening up your mind to possibilities you hadn't previously imagined and learning to stop stuffing your feelings, so to speak, according to what this scientist had said, in addition to that, what kind of things do you do to allow yourself to healthfully express yourself? I know you're interested in art. Do you find that is a good way for you to release things, or what works for you?
I've been trying to explore like emotional release techniques, and I do still find it difficult, to be honest. You know, a lot of stuff is physical when they talk about, there's stuff that people use for like tremoring their bodies to release, something to do with the fascia. I do like art. I don't think I'm doing it as much as I should. I think for me, I am learning personally that I need to feel more and really trying to allow myself to do it. So when I feel sad in the past, I would just move on. I just wouldn't even allow myself to feel it, and I would just move on and everything would be fine. Yeah. And now, you know, it starts, and it's actually kind of funny because for me to cry or for something to come up for me to want to cry, it's actually difficult in a way because I was so used to shutting it off that for me to start crying is like a big deal. And when I'm sad, I'm like, okay, Karishma, no, feel it.
It's a learning process.
It's a learning process, yeah. You're like teaching yourself how to cry, you know? Yeah. And so I would try and just let the feeling like encompass me in a way. And I would just let myself feel sad, and I would let myself cry. And I would cry and cry, and then afterwards I'm like, whoa, I feel so much better. I just released that feeling. I feel better. Now I can move on. Like I've let go of that. And I think in the past I wouldn't let go of it. I just, like you said, I just buried it and just like, you know, shut it off. And by shutting it off, I didn't release it. I was still holding it inside of me, and it just manifested differently. My muscles around my bladder probably just got tighter, and it's like squeezing everything, you know, or my back or whatever, you know.
Choosing not to focus on something, a feeling when it comes up, doesn't get rid of it. It doesn't release it. It just stores it inside of you.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be expressed.
Yeah. And I thought that was me being strong. I was like, nope, I just can't really feel it because whatever, I'm strong and I don't need to feel it. But that was like the opposite of strength. I think it takes a lot of strength to allow yourself to feel it. And it's so healthy to allow yourself to feel it and then move on. You know, you've processed the emotion. And I think I still have years and years of unprocessed emotions and trauma inside of me that, you know, I'm working on releasing and sort of re-experiencing in order to release.
Well, you are certainly not the only one. So hopefully hearing this will help other people who similarly have had difficult experiences, and at the time they were young, or they didn't properly understand how to experience and release the feelings that came up.
Yeah, when we're young, like, a lot of stuff happens to us, and then we create coping mechanisms, and a lot of these coping mechanisms are just for protection, like not allowing ourselves to feel.
Yeah, it's a protective method.
Yeah.
And it works very well.
It works very well initially, but now it's sort of harming us in the long run when we're not aware of it. We're not aware that we can change it, and we're strong enough now to deal with our emotions. When we were young, we weren't strong enough when things are just happening to you.
This is very true.
Yeah. So this makes me a big advocate for therapy, by the way. I feel like everyone should do it.
So I want to switch themes a little bit, and I want to talk to you about female archetypes.
Okay.
So there's a book by the author Dana James. I've discussed it with you before, and she says that there are 4 ways women use to build their self-esteem, and these different ways affect how they eat. So the first type of woman gets its self-esteem through nurturing others. So this would be sort of the mother archetype. The second archetype gets its self-esteem through career and work accomplishments. The third archetype gets its self-esteem through being seductive and by having lots of love interests, by looking very good, by their appearance. While the final archetype gets their self-esteem based on emotions and dreams. You can take this quiz online, and I did take this quiz, and I was the emotions and dreams archetype.
I'm not surprised. I can see that.
Well, so then these relationships, so for instance, the nurturer will maybe forget to eat because she's so busy taking care of the family. The career woman will put off eating because she's working on a presentation and then eat whatever is available at the time that she finishes. The seductress woman will eat whatever will keep her body in a nice condition. And the emotional and dreamer type will eat, for instance, when they are happy or sad, more based on emotions than for other reasons.
Hearing this, I would say that I'm also a dreamer. I definitely eat emotionally when I'm happy and sad. It does sound like there is some truth or logic behind it.
It's certainly a simplification.
Yeah.
But I can really think of most of the women I know, and they, I think, fall into one or two of these areas.
Yeah. It sounds like one could be a combination of these, with like some more dominant and some less so. Hearing this, like, I can definitely think of friends that would fall under, like, for example, the career-driven one. Yeah, and basically this is showing how our psychology and how we feel, our self-worth, how all of this is related to food, and it is, you know, a lot of food issues stem from mental health. You know, we always think, oh, I just need to eat the right diet, or I just need to be put on the right diet.
I just need to lose 3 pounds.
Yeah, and it all has to do with what I eat. Then I can lose 3 pounds or exercise.
Or I had a very stressful day today. I deserve that whole cake.
Yeah, you know, exactly. So we always think that it's just what we eat or what we exercise, but it's so much deeper than that. Being able to eat the right foods, it's not just knowing what to eat, but it's like being able to eat it, and that also has to do with how we feel, and, you know, mentally, and, you know, stress, I think we simplify it a lot, and we don't really understand the root cause. Like for me, being the dreamer, I think I can talk a little bit about my food issues. This is a bit personal, but I'll share. So I recognize that I always ate very emotionally, and I think that I would binge eat a lot. And because of this, I would binge eat everything, like even healthy food. Like I would roast like an entire like cauliflower, like huge tray of roasted cauliflower, and I would binge eat it till my stomach hurt.
I have done the same thing with Brussels sprouts.
yeah. Or like, but then I'd also do ice cream. Like I could do everything. It doesn't matter. But the key point was, because I was binge eating, I would restrict the type of food that I would eat so that I would feel better about it psychologically. So that's why I was like, okay, I'm allowed to do it if I eat these foods, you know? But it's not really, you're not really fixing the root cause of the problem, right?
The urge to overeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Comes from suppressed emotions or emotional pain.
Exactly. I figured out for myself that the reason why I needed to overeat so much was because while I was eating, during the time I was eating, it was calming for me. That's why I would just keep eating no matter how much my stomach hurt, because it calmed my nervous system. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it was very specific the way I had to do it, you know, like, and even if I had already eaten dinner out, I would have to come home and eat to calm myself.
It was a ritual, like a relaxing
I would
ritual.
Have to calm my stress levels, exactly, in my nervous system. Which is why I've gone to sound healing for the nervous system calming. So I would always have to listen to something or watch something. So basically something with voices by myself while eating. And what I understood from this is, you know, humans, we feel calm when we hear voices because it's like community, you're safer, you know, babies, how they fall asleep like at a party and then you put them in the room and then suddenly they wake up. It's because, you know, it's sort of like, I think, inbuilt in us that when we hear voices, it's like we're safe. At the same time, I personally did not feel safe. So I felt like I needed to be in a room alone in order to allow myself to eat, for my nervous system to go down, for like parasympathetic like digestion, you know. And it was the combination of these three things that I had to do. And when I realized that this is what I was doing just to calm myself, and thus restricting because I felt bad afterwards, I was like, okay, I need to break this pattern. I decided that I wasn't going to restrict what I ate, except for I don't eat gluten, so like I just continue with that one. Not restrict like any other foods. I decided, okay, so when I eat now, I'm not allowed to listen to anything or watch anything. I still often eat alone just because, you know, I am alone a lot of the time. But I thought that I had to break that habit, like that coupling, you know.
And you eat more conscientiously.
Exactly. So actually what I do often is I often go out and eat by myself, and it's like an exercise for myself. And I'm not allowed to use my phone. So there's like literally nothing else for me to do. I'm listening to voices, but I'm like, then I'm not in my like confined space with a shut door, you know.
It's not, you're not displacing yourself, you're conscious, it's not an activity where you are trying to forget where you are and what you're doing.
Exactly. It's not in order to just tune out and calm myself. Yeah. So yeah, it's been working well for me, just uncoupling that, but it's hard, you know. You have to be so conscious of it. Like I'll sit down to eat and I'm like, oh, and I just like put something on and like eat my favorite foods. You know? And I'm like, no, you're not allowed to do that, you know. And it's like an itch. It's like an itch that you need to scratch, but you just have to like not do it. And that's also why I like to go out and eat, because it makes it a bit easier not using my phone.
You don't have the same temptations.
You don't have the same temptations, exactly.
And you're also not alone.
And you're not alone, that's true. So it's helping me a lot, I think, psychologically. It's helping me a lot dealing with this psychologically. And also I'm trying to do other things that calm me, like knowing that I'm eating because I want to feel calm. I'm like, okay, what else makes me feel calm? It's like reading, meditating, like do these things instead when I feel stressed, because I know that I'm not hungry, you know? Yeah. But it takes so much, actually not necessarily just willpower, because I feel like me restricting food took much more self-discipline and willpower.
It takes kindness.
Yes, it takes kindness. The more you do it, the easier it gets. It's like you're rewiring stuff in your brain. You're like changing these habit pathways, you know? Yeah. Next step will be to eat healthier, but right now I'm just allowing myself to eat.
I can understand you very well, as I'm sure a lot of women can understand you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I used to binge eat vegetables at times when I was very stressed. So like you, I chose something very healthy. And I remember one time I ate a kilogram of carrots. It's like 2 pounds or something.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine called me and she's like, oh, let's go out, let's go dancing. And I said, I can't go out. I can't go anywhere. I'm way too fat. I just ate a kilogram of carrots. I can't leave my house now. I was like, the party's over. It's too late. But for me at that point in time, I couldn't leave home if I'd just eaten a lot, because then I would be fat. Even if I just ate a kilogram of broccoli, which will not make you fat, I would feel fat. So at those times, I could only eat a lot if I wasn't going out afterwards.
Yeah. It's so funny how these things have played such a big role in our life, and they stem from an entirely different place, you know? So it's like sort of understanding why we're doing these things and understanding what the cause is. And for me, I always, like I said earlier, I like to understand. And it helps me then change, because when I can understand something, it'll like switch something in my brain that I can, you know, do something about it.
Do you think that your attitude towards food and food being such a constant for you could be related to you growing up or living in so many places, that in some places you had your family at first and then you didn't have your family anymore? You had different languages, different culture. Do you think that it could have also, your strong interest in food, been tied to the fact that it was one of the few things that was always around?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I like so many different types of food, and I think having lived in so many different places, that's one thing you always have that you can always explore. I think it's a way that I explore new cultures, is through their food. And I notice that I do this whenever I travel, you know? When I travel, like, rather than like sightseeing and stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm in this country and I need to eat all the food. I need to try like everything local, you know. I need to eat all the street food. I need to experience the city locally through the food.
So food is one of the ways, your top way potentially of understanding a place when you visit it. You want to know the people, see what they eat.
Exactly. I think it's a huge part of our culture. And I don't know if it's just my perspective, because in Indian culture, like, food plays a huge role, and like you eat together, you know, it's like very social. Yeah, in my head, I think that I do believe that I can learn a lot from the culture through the food. And then on top of that, I enjoy it. Like, I feel like I can taste everything so strongly and smell everything.
Well, you're making me want to eat out more when I travel. Usually when I travel, I don't eat out very much. I'm not very food focused usually.
Yeah, it's my primary focus when I travel.
That's so interesting.
I have to say, it's the reason why I haven't been to Cuba yet. I'm really curious about Cuba, but people keep telling me the food isn't so good. And I'm like, oh, that kind of disappoints me a lot.
We should take a trip together and switch roles as an experiment. I will just spend my time going to different places and eating.
And I don't know what I'll do if I'm not eating. I'm like, what do I do?
You have to just walk around to different places and take pictures.
Oh yeah, I'm also not good at photos. Unless it's photos of food, I guess. But then I don't even share it. I just take it for myself, and then I never look at it again.
While talking to you, I can really understand why you started a company based on food. It's clearly something you're pretty passionate about.
Yeah.
What does life mean for you at this point in time?
I think in the past that it's always been, you know, like, you have to achieve this, you have to do this, like, get to the next step of life. And right now, not having a partner or, you know, a child, and not anywhere close to that yet, you know, I think I would have, if I was still thinking that way, I would have felt very disheartened that oh, I haven't achieved, oh, I haven't gotten to this point yet, so I'm not moving forward in life. But fortunately, since I've changed this mentality, I think life to me, like, okay, it's about experiences. My relationships are very, very important. I realize love is actually one of the most important things in this world, and if I had heard myself say this like a few years ago, I would not believe that, I would be saying this, because I didn't value emotions so much. But I really realized that love is so important, and putting value on your relationships. And the other thing for me is purpose, in a sense. I feel this drive towards doing something that benefits the universe. Okay, it sounds really big. But what I mean...
sounds logical, actually.
Right? So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking how, as a human being on this planet, I am taking a lot of natural resources. Okay, sunlight, yeah, but I'm taking water, I'm taking food from the earth, like, everything I'm eating, it comes from the planet. Also, for me to be here and live this life, there are so many people suffering in this world. I'm in such a fortunate position, and I feel like because I can, I should, in a sense, give back. And I truly feel this purpose of like doing something to give back to the world somehow. And this is what I would like to do in the future, whether it be something to do with the environment or something health related. I want to be able to use my skills, so figure out what my skills are that I can leverage in order to somehow benefit the world. And I was thinking about how often we do things just for economic gain, and I just feel like it's so important. Yes, we can make money. We don't even need that much money, but we can make money doing things that benefit others as well. Also, I was thinking about how money in the world is, where the money in the world is going and invested, and where, again, we invest in things for economic gain. Yeah, that's fine, but I just feel like money needs to be funneled to the right places, like the right resources, and I feel so passionately about the environment and benefiting humans. I have a little bit of a pet peeve when I think about the fashion industry and money spent on this, but I love creativity at the same time, but I just feel like it's a bit of a pity for me, because the world, like, we're so lucky to be living on this planet, we're so lucky to be here and be able to feel. And for us who are all able to live comfortable lives, we should do stuff to help others, It sounds very like cliche in a way, but I feel it so deeply inside me,
It sounds to me, do you think that the future for you will hold something that involves working in some capacity in a way that's good for the planet, good for people?
Yeah.
Because you sound very passionate about this type of work.
I do, and I think this is why I actually studied public health to begin with. Having grown up in Nigeria and seeing a lot, I wouldn't be surprised if I came full circle, but doing it through like an entrepreneurial lens, let's say.
What advice would you give to somebody? So let's say that there's somebody who's listening to this and they realize that they have emotions they haven't dealt with. They want to understand life a little bit better, maybe open their mind a little bit. What advice would you give them? Where would you tell them to start?
I would probably start with therapy.
That's logical.
Yeah, because then you just start talking. There's so much inside of us that we haven't thought about for so many years that we've like buried deep down. And once you start talking, you start bringing all of this stuff up. And only after you bring it up can you start processing it.
Very true.
And I think a lot of... And we can learn more about ourselves through this. We can learn more about how we think through this. And how we can even potentially change our thinking patterns. And that changes how we feel about ourselves as well.
Completely.
And I know that money is a big reason why a lot of people haven't started therapy. But there are, through tech and stuff, there are solutions that are cheaper, platforms and stuff. So So I really think that therapy would be a good start.
A good first step.
Yeah.
For some self-assessment.
Yeah, because like I said earlier about myself, I thought I could do everything on my own, and I'm that type of person where I'm very determined, and I'll learn everything and read everything, but in something like this, the relationship matters a little bit.
Sometimes you need a little help.
Yeah, and it's hard to admit that. I know. But I'm so glad that I did, and I realized it's my ego sort of holding me back. Been learning a lot about my ego, and even when you feel like you have low self-esteem and low self-worth, a lot of it is still ego related. But yeah, you drop that and start therapy. And then you can deal with it later.
Would you advise somebody, let's say that you were talking to a couple parents and they're thinking about moving to another continent with their children,
Mm-hmm.
would you advise people who may potentially move around with their children a few times to do it? Would you say that in the end it's okay for a child to move around to different locations if certain requirements are met? Do you think it was really hard for you? How do you feel about moving children around a few times before they're 18?
So I think it is hard because you don't have this consistency, right? At the same time, like, you learn to be more adaptable, but you need some sort of grounding. And I think that if you're doing that, the family unit is so important. And like, I think the support from the family is very important. And I think as parents, there are big responsibilities in that, in being aware of how your child feels, because they're going through a lot and probably aren't even able to, before even communicating what they feel, but they're not even able to understand themselves what they feel. So I think that being able to communicate openly about things is important, and understand the child.
So as long as a child has parents that can really nurture it and understand and provide family stability,
Mm-hmm.
you think it can work, because it will make the child, as you said, quite adaptable.
Yeah.
Probably make them much more open to international travel later in life.
Yeah.
The world will seem maybe a bit smaller for them, or a bit more.
Yeah, definitely feel smaller, and you'll learn to make new friends and stuff. But I think paying attention to emotional health is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And being sensitive, because children are sensitive, some of them. Whether or not you realize it.
Mm-hmm. Before I let you go today, I want to ask you 3 final questions that I'm asking all of my guests.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're a very avid reader, so this will either be very easy for you or very hard for you, because you have to choose one.
Oh.
Can you choose one book
wow.
to recommend to our listeners?
Oh, that's so tough.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really, really tough. Okay, so it also depends on who the listener is, because I have different groups, different books that appeal to different people.
So in this case, it's really, really hard for her.
Okay, wait. Can I say 3? No. Break the rules. Okay. Then
let's negotiate too.
Negotiate. Okay. So since we're talking a lot about emotions, I really liked the book Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. And it is a little bit spiritual, and if you're not, you just have to read past that, But there's a lot about letting go of emotions, which I feel that we all sort of need to do.
I need to read this book.
It's so good. It's a long read, but it's really good. And then the other one, sort of a similar topic, it's called The Courage to be Disliked.
Especially for a woman, sometimes It's hard for us if we feel like we're not pleasing people,
yes.
we're upsetting people.
Yes.
So it gives you advice in that direction?
Yeah. I mean, it's on the psychology behind it, but it's really interesting. And I would say it's a much easier read than the other book. Yeah.
If you want, you can name the third.
Okay, this I have so many.
Just 3.
Okay, well, since I was talking about physics earlier, I like The Self-Aware Universe by Dr. Amit Goswami.
You recommended that to me.
Yes.
Or I have that at my house.
Yes, and so it sort of tries to bridge the gap a little bit and show you the possibilities, so to speak, between physics and spirituality.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
What is the best thing for you to do that's healthy in a time of stress? What's your best advice for handling stress in a healthy way?
I'm still learning this, to be honest. Because I have to say I do feel stressed very easily.
You've already mentioned a couple of things, though.
Yeah. Meditation's been a big thing in my life, and I'm really enjoying the sound healing. But, recently in dealing with stressful situations, interpersonal situations, I feel like writing down what I want to say and explaining how I feel has really helped me release, because sometimes, it's not appropriate to say.
That's true.
Yeah. And so when I write it down exactly as I would like to say it, and not only that, because that's also just very emotional sometimes, but really explaining the reasons why I feel this and why they mean something to me, and going into the details, it first of all helps me understand myself more and why I'm feeling this, and secondly, it actually helps me release some of the stress.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
When you write it out, it's like in some way you release the words so that they're no longer inside of you, and you free yourself in some way. That's very good advice.
Yeah, and I think the key is not only writing it how you would send it, but also explaining why. And it really helps. I really feel that part particularly helps me to release it, because then I'm really getting to the root of it, in a sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So my last question to you is, what place in the world do you recommend everybody visit?
Oh, like on a holiday?
On a holiday, yeah, for example.
This is also really tough. There's so many
But
places.
you can only pick one this time. I was generous the first time.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad.
But you were giving really good information, so I wasn't really being generous. It made sense.
Generous to everyone else.
Yeah.
So one trip that was really special to me was when I went to the north of India. We drove up from Delhi up to Himachal Pradesh to Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama lives, and then from there to Manali and up to Leh. And that drive up the Himalayas to Leh in Ladakh was breathtaking. And what I found really interesting, and also there were a bunch of lakes up there at really high altitudes, and we went through, I think it was the highest drivable pass in the world, and it was at I think it was something like 6,500 meters. Does that sound right?
It could be right.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the highest motorable pass, and basically on that drive we saw so many different climates, and it was just so beautiful and so interesting, and it was really interesting for me to see how people lived, because it's kind of almost like desert like up there because it's so dry. By the way, you can only go in the summer because otherwise the roads are all frozen. It's also a very scary drive, to be honest.
But it sounds breathtaking and unforgettable.
Yeah, and it was really cool to see that people live in these little villages that exist because They, create little irrigation systems from like the rivers that come down the Himalayas,
Wow.
And seeing that, you see like how people used to live, and you can see like the cow dung that they're drying on the sides of the buildings. There were like houses, huge things of cow dung, because they use it as energy,
It's like a time capsule.
It is, and it was just fascinating to me to see that.
When did you visit?
This was when I did some public health work in Dharamsala, actually, and so it was about 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm definitely adding it to my list.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, going to Dharamsala is quite spiritual as well.
See, you were spiritual then already, you just didn't know it yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting place, and it's so different from the rest of India. Oftentimes in India you feel a lack of space because it's such a populated country, and up there's nothing but space.
Wow.
It's very interesting, and also interesting seeing different cultures, because in Ladakh, I think the local population is Muslim, but there's a huge Tibetan population, so you have a very interesting mix of Ladakhis and Tibetans who look kind of similar in a way because they're from similar region, right? But totally different religions and living together. It's quite cool.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I really liked that trip.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that information and for being my guest today, Karishma.
Thank you for having me.
I loved having you. Bye.